most listened to radio station was the Asda shop. More people listen to music played while they shop in Asda, which is actually a radio. It's an Asda radio station than any other, than the BBC, than anything in the UK.
Hello and welcome to the Radio.co podcast. Today I'm joined by Linda Coogan Byrne, who is the founder of the movement turn company Why Not Her. Alongside the Why Not Her, she is the founder and the presenter of the Why Not Her podcast. For any listeners that don't know, the Why Not Her is a movement that's turn company that seeks to redress the overrepresentation of men across the media sector, and it offers training for organisations needing to become more diverse. The podcast, Why Not Her, speaks to women and gender minority groups across sectors about gender disparity, the challenges they face, and the future of gender equality. Welcome, Linda. Thank you very much for being on the podcast.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So, for those that don't know about Why Not Her, let's just talk about that and how and why it was set up. So, when was Why Not Her set up, and what was the motivation behind it?
Yeah, Why Not Her was, I think the idea, the concept of it existed like the last few years in my head, but I just didn't have time to actually put the work into it. But then over COVID, there was an unprecedented period in most of our lives where everything was at a standstill, especially as we adjusted to the lockdown periods. And over the first lockdown, I just seen it as an opportunistic time to kind of go, right, there's a lot of disparity, there's a lot of inequality that I have seen from my own work and role in the music industry as a consultant, a label manager and a publicist. And I've always noticed it, and I just thought it was a great time to just kind of put the effort in to do something that would enact change. And I was on lockdown in Ireland. I'd been living in London and I went home to Ireland to attend a birthday party. And the week that I went over, it went international lockdown. So I was stuck in Ireland. So I was kind of like, right, had my laptop and I just kind of thought, right, well, how can I put something together? And I realised I had access to data on Radio Monitor, a platform that I use in work to update clients on, when they've been played on radio and whatnot. And the platform is fantastic. And I just looked around the platform in a more internalised kind of perspective to see what all the different elements were that I could use on the deck of Radio Monitor. And there's so much data that was there that I hadn't really looked properly into. So with that in mind and having access to that, I just said, right, well, I might just go back 5 years across radio, initially in Ireland. And I narrowed it down to the top 50 most played songs on Irish radio by domestic artists, and then did international artists, and then narrowed it down a bit more to the top 40. And then when I went to the top 20, what I seen was a consistency over the last 5 years from 2020 to 2015 of all the top most played artists from Ireland on Irish radio. And it was all the same artists over and over again. And it was all 100% homogenised cis-male artists, the same artists over and over again. So I was kind of thinking, right, I think this is probably not real. I'm just going to recheck this. And I rechecked the data and rechecked it. I said, nope, that's the data. So I kind of had a chat with a friend of mine who's also a client, Anya Tyrrell, a wonderful activist and feminist as well. And she did a few different campaigns over the years. And I said to her, look, I want to put together some sort of a data report. It hasn't really been done before. And the ones that are remotely even in connection with this type of data is very data laden, very heavy, very text, very academically kind of organised. And I said, I don't want to do something like that. I want something that's just going to pop at people and go, right, this is the data. Very visual. And Anya said, right, I know what to do. So we worked together and on the first report, and she worked on the visualization, on the graphics and stuff, which was brilliant. She's fantastic. And we narrowed it down to a year because we said if we did 5 years, it would be very hard impacting for people to kind of process all that and digest it. So we went to a year, and in the year found that mostly all commercial Irish radio, like by all I mean all, all of them, in commercial and national radio stations, aside from RTE Radio 1, they had predominantly 95 to 100% white male artists in their heavy rotation playlists that were from Ireland consistently, month after month. And so we put it together, and we issued it out, and we got in touch with other feminist organisations. We got in touch with the artists, women that we'd seen that tried to make it, that had released stuff, and we got their accounts and their testimonies, and we just seen that there was a huge disparity, racial disparity, gender disparity, and it was just profound. I don't think we were. Looking back, I think we were a little bit. We didn't realise the Pandora's box that we were about to open, because when we released the Irish report, it just it trended everywhere. On social media platforms, and within the first I think it was 24 to 48 hours, we had 2 million views of the Irish report, and then within a week it was 20 million, and people all over the world were talking about it. It was mad. And then people were kind of going, oh, will you do one for Sweden? Will you do one for France? Will you do one for Denmark? Will you do one for, all these different countries? And of course, I had lived in the UK, and I went, oh, I want to do one in the UK. So the UK one followed a few months later, and then that just, it just blew everything up, really, because it was more or less the same in the UK, which I didn't really think would happen, because I thought the UK were a little bit better than how it was in Ireland. But no, it seems to be, it was a continual kind of issue. So it was apparent that it was a music industry issue as opposed to an Irish music industry issue. So so that's kind of how it evolved, and how it kind of how it began. Yeah,
and I guess some kind of people's argument against that could be, oh, but these are the best musicians, but anybody that has any involvement in the music industry or is even just a music fan will know that is definitely not the case, and that we have amazing musicians that are from all backgrounds, races, ethnicities, gender identities. So obviously listeners will want to see diversity in radio plays, radio stations, etc., that reflect the music industry's vibrancy. But what are the consequences for those artists that aren't getting radio plays?
If you can't see it, if you can't hear it, you can't be it. It's as simple as that. We spoke to a lot of the companies, the radio companies, and groups and their playlist committees, and a lot of them were just, there was a lot of, to whom does the accountability lie? Is it the record labels? Is it the booking agents? And the thing is that it doesn't lie to one individual or one group or one set core in the industry, because it's an ecosystem at play.
Right.
If somebody is played on the radio, they're probably going to be streamed as well, because the playlisters will know the other playlisters on streaming platforms and on radio, and then the booking agents will come into effect, and then the record labels will sign, or the licensing deals will come in. So it's all one in the same. And if you look at the statistics, it's the same statistics across the board. So one lends itself to another disparity, to another disparity, to another disparity. So it's kind of like an eternal clog of exclusion. And of course, who benefits? Men benefit, and who doesn't benefit? Women, gender minority groups, and people of colour are the ones that don't benefit, because when it's homogenised and predominantly cis male, they don't want to share the slice of the pie. What's crazy in the whole last 2 years of doing these data reports, not one major artist that has been featured, major male artist that has been featured in the report, has shown any solidarity to women. None of them spoke out. None of them were like, oh, this is awful. We've had some amazing solidarity from bands and male artists that weren't featured in the top. But the ones that were, there's nothing. They don't care,
Don't want to give up their piece of the pie.
It signifies that they don't care. I can't speak on their behalf. But yeah, it's just kind of, it's just devastating for women that are writing songs, that are producing music, that are putting out material, and they're just being denied and being declined and being rejected all the time. So it has an economic effect, it has a psychological effect, it has a deep impacting effect on culture, because we're sending the message that women's voices don't matter, that women's voices aren't as good as men's, and that people prefer the male voice on the radio, when it's not true. I mean, it's scientifically proven that, and anyone can Google this, that women's voices are actually better, they're more soothing, they are better experienced in any type of narration style environment, or even in, look at Siri, look at Alexa, they're all women's voices, because even on a technological level, they're actually more, tech-wise, AI-wise, they just seem to be the better option, and it's all this algorithm nonsense, because algorithm-based systems are created by men, so it's kind of like they create and they curate everything. It's all these arguments, all these silly arguments of people, it's you have to do the research and you have to take the time to look at the data, and that's why we kind of lead with data. I mean, I can have all my own opinions, but they're redundant. They're redundant for a myriad of reasons, and for most of them, especially with trolls online or men that are counter arguing or trying to mansplain, they're redundant because I'm a woman, and my voice doesn't matter, and I'm shrill seeking and I'm bossy and blah blah blah. But realistically, it doesn't matter, because data is what matters, and the data is the power, because when it comes down to one opinion over the next, it's not quantifiable, but data is. So that's why we always run with data, because anytime we're doing a report, I never know what's going to show up on the results, and that's why we do every 6 months, we do kind of a soft follow-up, and then annually we've done 2020, 2021, and we'll do 2022 this summer, where we'll see what the changes have been in radio now that we've had all the conversations with different radio stations and different groups, and within radio and the sectors. And it's, there is a steady increase, and there is a clear, especially in Ireland, and I mean, you can see it even across award ceremonies like the Brit Awards and stuff, that a lot of these committees, a lot of these people have taken on board the data and gone, okay, right, we need to do something, we need to do our role here, in this ecosystem of the music industry, and try and make it better. And that's been such a wonderful reward in doing this work, because the work that we've done so far, it's all been volunteer, it's all been, we haven't made any money. I've invested thousands into it myself, and you find that a lot with feminist organisations and groups, is that you do have to invest your money or your time or your energy into it, because a lot of people, they don't want to hand over that type of power and that type of authority to groups that want to enact change. So I think it's all very never ending, but it's great that we can see the change.
What was really enlightening, what you just said there for me, was that it is an ecosystem, and that for artists or somebody even managing an artist or so, it may be difficult for them to actually get to a real decision maker. Or an individual decision maker that's going to determine if their song or so is played on the radio, which just kind of proves the need for a group like an organisation like Why Not Her, when it's so hard just to kind of get direct access and get directly to a decision maker that will, make that decision. Right, when you're saying it's kind of a shared thing across an ecosystem. So with this in mind, obviously you've very much alluded to it and kind of stated that you want to change this whole situation. So do you have tangible goals of what Why Not Her wants to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, initially, the main goal in Ireland, because Ireland is where I'm from, and the UK, was to make visible those that were made invisible, and to give a voice to those that voices weren't heard. And we have achieved a lot in the last 2 years. Say the likes of 2FM, a huge station in Ireland, they were 90 to 95% all white male artists. And then in the last 2 years, they're now at 50-50, and they have amazing diversity. They have loads of people of colour, they have different ethnic groups, they have loads of women, they've non-binary artists, they've non-gender conforming artists. I mean, it's incredible. It has never happened in the history of Irish music.
Wow.
And then we have Spin 103.8, the exact same. They were really, really low in supporting women on air. They're now, I mean, some months they're 70% women, which is brilliant. And they have so much diversity, and they support LGBTQIA artists and artists of colour. It's amazing. And then the stations that were very slow to react, which would be the regionals, especially down south, they're after doing a 360 like in the last 3 or 4 months, because they knew we weren't going away. And you know, it's been fantastic. Like, they're coming up now to 35-40%. So when you see this type of massive trajectory in data and in how people comply with governance and strategy and policy within radio, which is what we have been working with politicians, with the minister, with the broadcasting authorities and stuff like that. Like, we've been doing workshops and training, coaching shops and stuff, and it's been fantastic to see that what we set out is already taking place, you know. But it's about making sure that it's not performative and it's not tokenistic now, because in things like this you do see a wave of like, oh, the lights are on us, so we better just start, you know, we better look like we're doing something. But there is that consistency now in the last few months that was never there in Irish radio, like never. And I mean, it wasn't easy to get, but we were also told at the beginning, you know, I mean, Jesus Christ, I've been blacklisted from so many stations, and then they eventually came back and were like, hey, like waving a flag, you know, maybe what you were saying is actually true and you weren't just attacking us. And the fact that radio thought I was attacking them was hilarious. Like, I mean, oh my God. I mean, I know I'm working in the music industry 20 years. I know some of these DJs 15 years. Wow. I know their family and everything, like, and I've had DJs just not speak to me for like a year. So it's great to see them kind of starting to come back and kind of going, oh, hey, if you want to send me some music, or if some of your clients, you know, do, you know. But they really tried. A lot of the industry really tried to silence. I've been, you know, there's been a lot of stuff happen personally and attacks and stuff like that, but I just have that resilience. I'm a Taurus, I'm stubborn. And I mean, and starting to see the outcome and starting to see all these amazing artists that were never you know, represented in the way they should have been, now being represented is brilliant. And then you look to the UK and, you know, there's been massive increases. It's the exact same as in Ireland across a myriad of radio stations, and we see new policies put in place. We see like Bauer Media, who are one of the biggest media conglomerate groups in the world, adapt to a diversity and equality strategy across their networks. Like, that's a global change shift, like, you know. And even if radio stations may have been, you know, talking about it in the last few years, they weren't really applying it. But now with the data and with the push and with the amount of, you know, microscopic introspection that's been done on it and that has been made out to the public and to the media, they had to act. They had to start implementing these policies and new strategies. And with the campaign work, and with other groups, because when you start working, and again, when you start working together, I'm so against this whole, oh, they did something and we did and we're doing better, and I'm not here for that type of tripe. You know, we were successful because I work in music for a very long time, and I had thousands of people on my mailing list, and I had instant access to a lot of press and a lot of journalists and a lot of media, and for that purpose I had the upper hand in how the campaign was so successful that other people may not have had in different organisations. So I reached out to different organisations and we swapped data, and then I included their data in our you know, emails and mailing list stuff. So it was all about kind of working together, rising together. I'm totally against people not working together. We don't enact change if that happens. And too often in feminist movements, that kind of pinning women against each other, it's counterproductive. And you know, I mean, when I started out, I initially went to Key Change, who are a group doing amazing work. And they rejected me. They said, no, we don't think you'll ever do anything. You know, we just don't think you're going to do anything to help this cause, and they rejected my application to do stuff with Key Change. And I mean, I could have took that as a real like, oh my God, but I went, okay, well, maybe that's not for me. I'm going to start my own collective.
Yeah.
And you know, we've had probably more visibility than Key Change, but that doesn't matter. We're still working. Like we send all the reports to them. They share our material. We share theirs. It's not about, you know, holding grudges, or, you know, sometimes things don't happen for a reason. You know, if I hadn't been rejected by them, Why Not Her would have never happened, and we wouldn't have seen the changes that were then to follow, you know. I trust the path of fail and try, you know. Sometimes failure can lead to the biggest successes, you know.
That's very true. And what I think is great about, one of the many great things about Why Not Her is that you're not just about saying this is what's wrong with this industry. You really celebrate when radio stations have kind of turned things around, when they've made changes, and also you do offer training, and you do offer support for organisations that are looking to change. So what kind of support and training do you offer specifically?
Yeah, we do seminars and policy workshops. I mean, policy and strategy are probably two of the main causes, a lack of it and a lack of understanding within it, that can cause a lot of disparity within companies, within organisations, even when in a playlist meeting. Like, I remember talking to a very big network in the UK, and I was chatting to their lead, a woman, lovely woman, and I said to her, like, but when you're going into a playlist meeting, are you listening to the music? Are you seeing the music? You know, is it just a repetition? Are you just going by a trend of, oh, this is what we want in this sound, and we'll just maintain this sound? Because you'll see across different playlists, like, you know, Radio 1, Radio 2, or in Ireland, Spin, Today FM, whatever, they all have a similar type of sound. But if that sound sonically represents visually and culturally only one perspective and one voice and one narrative style, well, then that's not working. So you kind of have to implement a policy and a strategy where they're not just listening to the music, they're looking at who's producing the music, who's creating the music, because music isn't just something, unfortunately, in the music industry, it isn't just something you listen to. You have to, you know, look at the band, where are they coming from? What is their story? What's their background? You know, what's their fan base like? And all these things, people say, oh no, if you have a good song, it will rise. That's not true. You know, there's a process as to how things operate. And, you know, if you look at then the labels that are being, you know, that are signing artists, it's still like 20% of major labels are female identifying artists. So there's still 80%, in some cases 85% to 90% that are predominantly white male. So you have to look at what type of way you're accepting music into a station. So, like, say for instance, the BBC did this amazing switch where they used the BBC uploader system, and anyone from any path or cross in life was able to upload their music directly, and it went straight to the playlisters committee. So you didn't have to hire a publicist, you didn't have to go to a record label, you didn't have to get a management or have loads of money supporting you. If you had a good song and you had a good story and you're pushing your music out there and you're really actively trying, you just register on the BBC website, upload your production, your play, your podcast, your music, your single, your video, whatever, and that goes straight into the committee and they can all view it. And it doesn't have to be, you know, coming from a big person that you pay a lot of money to. So that cuts that type of disparity, the classist disparity as well. So it's great. So kind of incorporating all of these things and then getting rid of bias. Bias is huge. So we kind of train people as to different ways they can do that. And within the companies and within the broadcasting sector, how people can then, you know, identify their own biases and their own cultural biases, racial biases, ethnic biases, even biases in the workplace, and gender bias and that, and just kind of and grow from there. You know, we all have biases. I have biases. You have biases. Everyone has biases. It's just about identifying them and knowing how to move and to progress and evolve from that.
Absolutely. And obviously, within the UK, there has been a huge growth in independent online radio stations. And so I'm just wondering what your opinion is on how this kind of growth of independent radio stations is kind of influencing kind of commercial, regional or BBC radio stations across the UK and Ireland. Because obviously, you know, now we have radio stations like Foundation FM, all women radio largely all women radio station in London. We have No Signal, which is self-professed black radio, and we have those independent radio stations that are kind of meeting a demand, the listeners' demand for having different people on air and different music as well. So, in your opinion, are these influencing how the kind of the big players program their stations and shows?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is looking at the UK data. We went on what the most listened to stations were, and I think there was like 33 or something. Then we narrowed it down to 27 of the most listened to radio stations. And actually, number one, the most listened to radio station was the Asda shop. More people listen to music played while they shop in Asda, which is actually a radio. It's an Asda radio station than any other, than the BBC, than anything in the UK. But we didn't have access to the data, so we were like, we'd love to actually. But it's on the YouGov site. There's different sites for data, but we couldn't get the actual full crunched data of the artists within it. But we know for a fact that Asda is the most listened to radio station in Britain. So that's not a traditional radio station. So it's huge. I mean, there's a lot of digitization happening, changes and trends happening in the music industry, and with especially over COVID where everything went online, there's been massive, and I don't think the qualitative data is in yet because we were just literally coming out of that massive transition. So I'll be better equipped to be able to comment on that once I have data over the next few months, and we are looking at it because we're registered with Chartmetric and they have a lot of data that we're just sinking our claws into at the moment. But yeah, it's so fascinating because the landscape of music as we know it is completely changing. But if we look to kind of Spotify and you know, streaming sites as well, like within the UK, I actually have it here because it was just so interesting. A lot of people were kind of going, there's in the UK, you know, if we go to, you know, TikTok and to Spotify, we're going to see loads of different artists because digital trends, you know, break different artists, where as opposed to radio. So radio, it really isn't king, and I completely did not agree with that. And lo and behold, what we see is the most played artists on you know, on Spotify and TikTok within the year up until last year were direct correlations to those that were the most played in radio. So if it's the case where we see, and again we're going to look more into this year at the end of the summer when we have even more data on top of the data we had last year, what we see is that people's opinions and views, that radio is completely different to streaming sites and is completely different to digital radio, like traditional radio. It isn't true, because if Ed Sheeran is being successfully played across YouTube, across TikTok, across Spotify, across traditional radio formats, radio and other platforms are going to play him as well, because he's everywhere. So you're going to want to support a band that everyone likes, because the more you play what audience want to hear, because you're curating the culture, you're curating the demand. And I had this chat with a DJ from BBC 6, actually. I was on a panel last year, and this DJ said, we don't actually get people messaging into our station, like on his particular show. And he said, you know, we just get, you know, requests for male bands. And I said, but can I ask you a question? I said, and this is very important. He said, yeah. And I said, do you play women on your show? He said, what? I said, have you played women on your show? Are you playing it on the shows that you have? And he said, no. And I said, well, how are you going to get people that are dedicated listeners to your show requesting people that they have never heard? And it was like but I said, before you comment, I said, like, just think about that question. I said, if you don't see something the demand isn't there. I said, it's like someone having this imagine if Tesla was never released and Elon Musk has this amazing car that can change colours, but he doesn't say anything to anybody that it exists. No one's going to know about them. No one's going to know about this amazing car, this electric hybrid car or whatever, unless it's actually put out there. So it works the same in the music industry. I'm just getting up this. So like if we look at the top 10 most popular UK artists and bands across Spotify, YouTube and TikTok, last year, Ed Sheeran is number 1, Dua Lipa was number 2, Calvin Harris, do any of these ring a bell? Like, come on. Calvin Harris, Coldplay, Harry Styles, Sam Smith was the only non-binary artist in the entire report. Little Mix, James Arthur. We've seen an increase of Queen because the film had been released. There was a lot of emphasis put on Queen in the last few years. So you see that in digital trends. And that was Spotify. And then you go to YouTube, number 1, Ed Sheeran. Number 2, Calvin Harris. You have Dua Lipa, you have Adele, you have Coldplay, Sam Smith. So you have the same artists appearing over and over again. So it lends itself to kind of, okay. But then when you look at TikTok, which is a virality-led platform where there's no real curation happening because it's so new, you see Max and Harvey are number 1, and you probably never heard of Max and Harvey. I don't know whether you have or not. I know Mackenzie Saul. Loads of people won't have heard of these. Tom Felton, Kira King. Sam Ryder is massive, and Sam Ryder now is representing the UK in the Eurovision. Ed Sheeran was actually number 10 on TikTok, on TikTok. So you kind of have, Anne-Marie was in there, KSI was in there. So you have some kind of little. You're veering off again from. Radio stuff, because TikTok is a platform entirely of its own, and it's so kind of recent, and people are still wrapping their heads around it, whereas YouTube and Spotify has that kind of cultural indent. They have that system in place, but TikTok hasn't been corrupted by labels at the moment. It's still led on virality, and it's still fan base led. So when you see what the fans want, there's loads of diversity. There's women in there, there's artists of colour, so it's a clear indication that when an ecosystem that is predominantly hell-bent on not playing women and artists of colour are not involved, well then people actually listen to and they're drawn to artists of colour and non-gender conforming artists and different diversity, and millions, like 770.4 million people listen to Max and Harvey, and nearly 200 million Mackenzie, all these different artists, and they're not played on the radio, because I cross-checked, and most of them, bar KSI, Anne-Marie and Ed Sheeran, they're not heavy rotation radio artists. So that's why data is so interesting, because you can see on different grids, on different platforms, what systems are in place and what way they're curated, and when it's left to fans, it's very different,
It's a very interesting point. It's very interesting to think how TikTok hasn't been rigged by the
not yet.
Certain,
they're really trying.
Certain elements of the music industry, and let's hope that doesn't happen at any point. But the skeptics of us might think it will, of course. Can you draw any particular conclusions about the pandemic in regards to diversity on the radio? Or were you noticing that...
Not yet, but I do go through this in my book that's going to be out early next year. So
exciting times. And the book will be called...
Why Not Her?
Why Not Her?
It's Why Not Her? A question on justice. So it's questioning the accountability of the ecosystem of the music industry and who is to be held accountable. And then the injustices that women and people of colour have had to face as a result.
Brilliant.
It's been hacked.
I did see this on Twitter. So,
I finished the whole book like November last year, but my laptop was hacked and everything got to do with the book was deleted, so I had to rewrite the whole thing. So it's been a journey. There's a lot of people don't want the book coming out because there's a lot more data in the book. There's a lot more kind of facts and perspectives and introspection into the industry. So it's again, it's never kind of been done before. So it's been interesting. I mean, I have it under lock and key now in a safe in the Cayman Islands.
Or is it in the Cayman Islands?
Hopefully it won't be deleted or taken again or whatever. But Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been a roller coaster. I had a huge Instagram account, and that was hacked and deleted. I had, websites deleted and stuff. Like, I've had a lot, of cyber attacks.
I really can't believe. I mean, I guess it in some ways it shouldn't be surprising, but it still is surprising when these things happen. That when I saw that your laptop had been hacked, and the only thing that had changed on your laptop was the book, the manuscript had been deleted, I was just in shock. I was like,
yeah, it's crazy. Like, I hired an amazing team to kind of retrieve it, and even the cloud sites like the Apple iCloud, Microsoft One, like everything, Google, everything, they wiped everything. So yeah, but it wasn't only 2 years. I've been writing the last 10 years because I'm a memoirist anyway, and I was putting together 3 books. And there was a lot of personal journey stuff in there because I've worked with lots of different record labels and had different experiences, and yeah, so it was 10 years of work gone. So it was even talking about it now, it's like, it was it was strange, a very strange experience, I have to say.
Well, you will not be silenced. You've rewritten it. It's under lock and key. It will come out. Yeah. So we've touched upon the lack of diversity in what gets played on radio. But we haven't so much touched upon the diversity with on-air talent as well. Do you think that if striving towards more diversity in on-air talent would also lead to diversity with on-air radio play?
Of course. Like, we did a report on Irish radio called Behind the Airwaves, and it's basically the teams that are in Irish radio, so the broadcasters themselves. And say, like, in Ireland, like 3.19 million people tune into Irish radio, for 4 or 5 hours every weekday. So that's a lot of people that still listen to the radio. And if you go to kind of national and regional stations, 11% are female presenters, 89% are male presenters. When we had a look at current affair and talk shows, so you're kind of looking at the music that was originally 90 to 95%, and then you look at the anchor of the male voices on talk show radio and radio shows across Irish radio that are actually the gatekeepers of, political platforms. Like, the guests that they have in then are predominantly male. The content is predominantly the male narrative, the male voice. I mean, there was even shows where you had menstruation topics and stuff like that, and they had male guests on talking about it, and it was just kind of, you're kind of going, okay. Or, over COVID, like women's voices in Ireland, I mean, the COVID task force was predominantly male. If you looked at lineups on television that were talking about child rearing and how, the homes are affected, it's women that are predominantly running the homes during COVID, even though the husband or the partner might have stayed at home as well. The emphasis on the core functionality of keeping the family together was put and placed on the women. But yeah, it was all the men that were commenting, and that had, their opinions there, like, and it's during them hours of power, like an amazing journalist and feminist, Joyce Fagan, did an article for the Irish Examiner, and she states that it's during these hours of power where the first draft of public policy is formed. And she goes on to say, it's not just idle chit chat or easy listening music that's being churned out, which is 85 to 90% in the top heavy rotation charts, as our reports laid out. But it's news coverage, like it's hard hitting political programs, it's the guests, it's the topics, it's literally, if you want someone to give you their advice, people that are listening to the radio, which is over 3 million people in Ireland, are being given the idea and the view and formulating their opinions on women is that men's voice and men's opinions are the ones that matter, and are the ones that are concrete, and are the ones that actually serve as a function of how we place our society together and our culture. And it's completely wrong, So yeah, I mean, we looked into that. We haven't done the UK yet, but we will. I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be very similar. And, you know, then you go to the TV shows, and it's, you know, the women sitting down with the dresses on and the men in their suits and they're having the crack, and the women are all, you know, very, very femme, they deal with the light lifestyle topics. And then when it comes to the interviews, it's the men having the hard interviews with the guests, you know. So there's a lot of that at play. There's a lot of, you know, gender assumption and roles being attributed to different types of producers and shows, and it's really alarming, you know. And not only that, it has given us the plausibility to kind of go to ministers, and we went to the president, and we went to different political groups, and we said, look, women in politics in Ireland is really low, and this is a contributing factor as to why it is because when people are listening into their station, and then when it comes to polling, you know, on a political level, on a political agenda, you know, the radio stations then, you know, have ties in with political parties. I mean, it goes deep, So when you're discussing these types of proof, data proof stuff, it can be very, very dangerous, as I have learned. But it can be very raw for a lot of people that are used to having power, and those people that are used to having power are men, you know, white middle-aged men. And then you go to who's running the stations, it's men. So it's all very, very structured and curated culturally to set the tone, you know, audibly to set the tone, and then like musically to set the tone. It's interesting.
It's all interconnected, really, isn't it? And it all has a knock-on effect elsewhere in society. And it's,
everything. And I mean, if you look at the regional stations in Ireland, and what's interesting is Bauer took over Spin, Today FM, and big commercial stations in Ireland there. They did the changeover last year. And I mean, nobody's seen that coming. Well, I mean, some people seen it coming, but I mean, it's great because Bauer have made that pledge to do better and to actively participate in diversifying and you know, not being as less marginalised. And we've seen huge increases. We've even seen, you know, black presenters being put in, people of colour being put into radio stations, whereas they haven't done that, only for like little token ones every few years in Ireland. But we're seeing women being given positions as presenters now and on music shows, and you know, we're seeing a lot of changes now with Bauer after coming in, and that's going to be huge. But then you look at the, you know, the other radio stations, and they're all interconnected with the same ownership, and they have been, you know, very slow to come on board. But we see now in the last, like this year, like the last 3 months, that they're shifting now towards 35%, 40% inclusion within the music area, and then within, you know, the cultural context of, you know, art shows and guests, we're seeing an increase of women on air as well. So as long as that continues to rise, we're going to see a ripple effect on our political landscape, on our creative cultural landscape, you know, how women are viewed in society, their place, their role in society. But it has to continue to change. Again, it can't be tokenistic, and it's great. And this all has happened within the last 2 years, and with the backing of data. You know, it's powerful. Yeah. It's a powerful tool for change.
Yeah, thank you for putting so eloquently why representation is so significant for any society.
It really is.
Yeah. So obviously some changes are happening, as you've said. But what more do you think needs to be done?
I mean, like, it can't happen too quick. Like, there's a brilliant book, Mediocre, that I just recommend everyone to read, and it's just incredible. And it's literally there's a part in it. It's called the White Male Supremacy, Mediocre, by Ijoma Oluwa, an incredible feminist and activist. And in it, she says, like, why are we always told to go slow? Why does change have to happen so slow for marginalised people, for LGBTQIA people, for black people and people of colour and women? You know, because men are like, oh no, we, you know, in the next 5 years we'll see the change. Or you see these like summits of in the year 2050, we'll hopefully have 20% women, or we'll hopefully have like 3 people on a council that are of colour, you know. But these are, again, it's kind of like, why do we have to go slow? Women are ready for change. Black people are ready to be given the same rights, the same inclusion, the same, you know, everything as white people. People of colour are ready to be included and to be heard and to be seen and to be considered equal to everyone else, you know. So, and people with disability. I mean, there wasn't one person in the entire data reports that we've done that had a disability, not one.
Wow.
So, I mean, that they weren't even in, they didn't even exist to be in the data entries. So there's a huge disparity there. So there's always room for change, you know. I mean, what we've seen like in the last 2 years has been historic. I mean, it's brilliant to see, but again, unless there's a policy put in place, and unless something is actually solidified within its context of legislation change, which is what we're working towards, amendment of bills and rights within government legislation, it can drop again, you know. So it's kind of a case of to have something solid and set in stone, and to have the likes of, you know, it's great that the BBC 50/50 gender and equality project are happening, but it's implementing that. It's not just writing about what they're going to do, it's about doing what they're saying they want to do, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just continually aiding and supporting and working towards that. But there's still so much work to be done, you know. And it's this thing of, oh, be happy with your slice of the pie, you know. I mean, I was nominated into the Arts Council there a few weeks ago in Ireland, which is an unpaid role.
Right.
And I swear to God, as an activist, I'm just destined to just never be paid for anything I do. But and a campaigner. But a lot of people don't know that, you know. It's an unpaid position, and everyone was like, oh, she got that because she was in with the minister, or because of the work they're doing. And it's like, dude, seriously, like, it's an unpaid position.
Yeah.
It's, you know, taking up 2 hours extra nearly every day of my you know, my work life.
So you're losing out financially as well.
Life, and it's actually giving again back and being of service to people and to try and help the people on I'm a board member now, so I'm going to functionally try to change from within the system that can change to incorporate a better diversity, better policies, inclusion. And, you know, again, I'm doing that of my own volition in my own time, but a lot of people just see that if women start getting a little bit of you know, notice or notoriety, or if they start getting some sort of support, well, then it's like, oh, they're going to run away with themselves, or, oh, they're only doing this because they have an agenda or whatever. You know, that's nonsense. You know, we all deserve to be given a rise. We all deserve to be paid for the work that we do. You know, to be given a promotion, to do exactly and achieve exactly as much as our white male counterparts, you know, to live the dream and chase the dream, you know.
Absolutely. What is the future of Why Not Her?
I just want to, I would love to be able to do so, like, just to train as many people in as possible and to kind of use the power of data. But in my work, which is working in the music industry, it's just so busy this year. So I'm trying to kind of balance everything. But my hope is that, like, by 23, 24, I can just hand my music company over to, you know, my staff and let them run it, and just fully throw myself into the work that Why Not Her is doing, and to go more you know, internationally based. And we're working on a report in the US. It's going to take another few years because it's just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of data entries.
Wow.
And yeah, just to try and initiate and instigate the change that we have already began and achieved in Ireland and the UK, but throughout all the European countries and in the US and elsewhere. I mean, this is only the beginning, you know, it's only the beginning.
Thank you very much for your time, Linda. We really appreciate hearing from you.
No problem at all.
Yeah, I think Why Not Her and similar organisations are so crucial to our radio landscape, music industry. As you say, the significance of representation on the radio within the music industry does have a big knock-on effect for the rest of society.
And just before you go, how would you like to launch your very own online radio station? Surprisingly, it's a lot easier than you may think. And the absolute best way to get started is by chatting to myself or another member of the Radio.co team. Just head to Radio.co/book a demo to schedule a video call with us, where we'll discuss your plans, answer your questions, and of course guide you around the software. Or click on the link here to take your first step into launching your very own 24/7 global radio station.